The Black Boy Who Couldn't Enter the Toy Store. New York, 1925. The sky dawned gray over Harlem, as if sensing the weight of the day to come. Benjamin Wilson adjusted the gold watch on his wrist, observing his reflection in the oval mirror of the bedroom. 42 years old, hair with strands of gray at the temples, impeccably tailored suit. A successful businessman, owner of 3 establishments in the neighborhood, including the largest toy store in the area. Wilson's Toys and Wonders was more than a business. It was a symbol that a black man could achieve something significant, even when the world insisted on reminding him daily otherwise. Are you enjoying this story? Then help the channel by subscribing. Look, 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed. If you're part of that group, take the chance and subscribe now. It's free, and that way you'll keep receiving incredible and exciting stories. Oh, and don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find even more exciting stories like this one. Thomas, Benjamin called, adjusting his silk tie. We're going to be late for breakfast. Thomas Wilson, his 8-year-old son, came running into the room, already dressed in his school uniform. The boy was the spitting image of Benjamin's late wife, with the same almond-shaped eyes and radiant smile that lit up any room. Dad, can I go to the store after school today? Mrs. Jenkins said the new lead soldiers from Europe have arrived. Benjamin smiled, adjusting his jacket. Of course you can, son. But remember, school duties first. He tousled the boy's curly hair. I hired a new manager yesterday, Mr. Patterson. He doesn't know you yet, so tell him you're my son when you arrive. Thomas nodded, excited. His father's store was his favorite place in the world. A palace of wonders where toy soldiers marched in formation. Trains ran on miniature tracks, and porcelain dolls smiled from the shelves. It was a place where, for a few hours, Thomas could forget the invisible rules that governed his life outside those walls. Benjamin's driver, Samuel, was already waiting with the gleaming black automobile in front of the 3-story house on the north side of Harlem. It was one of the most imposing residences in the neighborhood, with its tall windows and red brick facade. Benjamin had purchased the property 5 years ago, when business began to prosper significantly. Good morning, Mr. Wilson, young Thomas. Samuel opened the car door, his time-worn face breaking into a genuine smile. Samuel had worked for Benjamin for nearly 10 years, since the days when his employer had only a small newsstand. Good morning, Samuel. To school first, then to the store, Benjamin instructed, settling into the leather seat. Thomas jumped in, carrying his book bag. The car glided through the streets of Harlem, passing crowded apartment buildings and small businesses. On the sidewalks, black men and women were starting their day. Some looked admiringly at Benjamin's automobile, others with a mixture of respect and envy. Benjamin knew those looks well. He was the man who had made it, the living example of what was possible to achieve, even with all the barriers. But he also knew that his success was an anomaly, not the rule. For every Benjamin Wilson, there were thousands of talented, hard-working black men and women who would never have the same opportunity. No matter how hard they worked or how brilliant they were. Dad, why do some white boys at school call me mean names? Thomas suddenly asked, his small voice contrasting with the gravity of the question. Benjamin felt his heart tighten. It was the question every black father dreaded. The inevitable moment when he needed to explain to his son the cruelty of the world that awaited them. Thomas, there are people who judge others by the color of their skin, not by the content of their character. It's wrong and unfair, but it's the reality we face. What matters is that you know your worth. You're a Wilson. You carry your grandfather's name, who was born a slave and died a free man who could read and write. You carry your mother's name, who was one of the first black women to graduate from a university. Benjamin paused, searching for the right words. When these children offend you, remember they're just repeating what they heard at home. Their ignorance doesn't diminish who you are. Thomas nodded, his thoughtful gaze turned to the window, watching the world go by as he absorbed his father's words. The Lincoln School for Colored Children was a red brick building, smaller and simpler than the schools for white children in other districts. But Benjamin was part of the parent association that worked tirelessly to ensure the best possible education for black children in New York. He donated generously, funded scholarships, and maintained a constantly updated collection in the school library. "Have a good day, son. I'll be at the store when you finish your classes." Thomas waved and ran to the schoolyard where other black children played before the bell. Benjamin watched him for a moment, feeling that mixture of pride and concern so familiar to black parents. "To the store, Mr. Wilson?" Samuel asked, returning to the wheel. "Yes, Samuel. And today I'll need you to make a special delivery downtown. A set of miniature trains for the mayor's son." The driver nodded. They both knew what this meant. Benjamin could sell toys to the richest and most influential families in New York, but the orders needed to be delivered through the back door, and payments were often made through intermediaries. Few wanted to be seen entering a black man's store, no matter how exclusive his products were. Wilson's Toys and Wonders occupied a corner building on Lenox Avenue, its elegant display window showcasing toys that made children's eyes sparkle. Benjamin had expanded the business 3 times in recent years, and now the store occupied 2 floors. The first was dedicated to conventional toys, dolls, trains, miniature cars, and board games. The second floor housed the most exclusive and rare pieces, hand-painted lead soldiers from Germany, doll houses with miniature furniture from England, articulated puppets from Italy. Benjamin entered through the front door, the bell above the entrance announcing his arrival. The store was still empty at that hour of the morning, but Sarah, the oldest saleswoman, was already arranging the display window. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson," she greeted him with a warm smile. Sarah had worked for Benjamin since the store opened and was like an aunt to Thomas. "Good morning, Sarah. Has the new manager arrived yet?" "Yes, sir. Mr. Patterson is in the office reviewing the accounting books." Benjamin nodded, satisfied. Harold Patterson had come with excellent recommendations. He was a middle-aged white man who had worked in a large department store for 15 years before accepting the position at Benjamin's store. In an ideal world, Benjamin would have preferred to hire a black manager to give someone from his community the opportunity. But the sad reality was that having a white man as manager opened doors, facilitated negotiations with suppliers, and attracted clientele that otherwise would not consider buying from a black-owned establishment. "Mr. Patterson," Benjamin called, climbing the stairs to the small office above the store. "Good morning." Harold Patterson rose immediately, extending his hand. "Mr. Wilson, good morning. I was just reviewing last month's figures. I must say I'm impressed with the sales volume." Benjamin shook the extended hand, observing the man before him. Patterson seemed genuinely respectful, but Benjamin had learned not to trust first impressions. Many white men could be cordial face-to-face with a black businessman, only to speak disparagingly about him in other circles. "Yes, we had a good month. Special orders are increasing. In fact, we have a delivery to the mayor's residence today." Patterson raised his eyebrows, surprised and clearly impressed. "The mayor? That's remarkable." Benjamin smiled slightly. "Just business, Mr. Patterson. We have products that cannot be found anywhere else in the city. That opens certain doors, even for an establishment like ours." The morning passed quickly, with Benjamin reviewing the accounting books, attending to special customers, and orienting Patterson on the store procedures. At noon, he retired to lunch at the small cafe across the street, another of his businesses. The Lenox Cafe served a predominantly black clientele, offering home cooking at reasonable prices. It was a meeting point for the local community, and Benjamin often used a table in the back for business meetings. "Mr. Wilson, the usual?" asked Mabel, the gray-haired waitress who had worked at the cafe for almost as long as Sarah had at the toy store. "Yes, Mabel, and bring the newspaper, please." Benjamin opened the New York Age, the main newspaper of the city's black community. The headlines spoke of the ongoing challenges faced by black veterans who had fought in the Great War, only to return to a country that treated them as second-class citizens. There was also news of Harlem's growing artistic community, with announcements of jazz performances and poetry readings. As he ate his lunch, Benjamin reflected on his own journey. Born in the South, the son of former slaves, he had fled to the North as a teenager, determined to build a different life. He worked at the docks, saved every penny, educated himself in public libraries. When the opportunity to buy a small newsstand arose, he didn't hesitate. From that stand was born his first real business. Soon came the toy store, then the cafe. Benjamin had married Eleanor, a teacher educated at Howard University, and together they had built a life that their parents could never have imagined. When Eleanor died during Thomas's birth, Benjamin vowed he would give his son everything money could buy, but he knew that all his wealth could not protect Thomas from the prejudice he would face. The cafe doorbell rang, and Benjamin looked up to see Marcus Green enter. Marcus was a lawyer, one of the few blacks admitted to the New York Bar Association, and a close friend of Benjamin's. "Ben, I thought I'd find you here." Marcus sat down, adjusting his thin-framed glasses. "We need to talk about the purchase proposal for the property in the Bronx." Benjamin folded the newspaper, turning his attention to his friend. "Any problem with the papers?" "Not exactly. But the seller is now hesitant. It seems he discovered that the buyer is—" Marcus lowered his voice. "A colored man." Benjamin sighed, an almost imperceptible gesture that carried the weight of countless similar disappointments. "I'm offering $5,000 above market value. What's the real objection?" "The same as always, Ben. He fears that the presence of a black owner will devalue the adjacent properties. I suggested using a white intermediary to finalize the purchase as we did in Queens. It was the business reality for men like Benjamin. Even with money, even with connections, certain doors remained closed unless they found ways to circumvent racial obstacles. Do that. Use the firm as an intermediary, but don't offer even a penny more. I'm already paying a considerable premium for the privilege of spending my money on that property." Marcus nodded, making notes in his notebook. "And about the store expansion? Did you get the financing?" Benjamin smiled ironically. 3 banks refused me despite the numbers. Continental Trust finally approved after the president's son bought one of our imported trains and was delighted. "Connections," Marcus commented, shaking his head. "It always comes down to that, and not making mistakes. Marcus, men like us can't afford to fail. A white man fails, he starts over. A black man fails, and it's proof that they are not capable of running businesses." The conversation was interrupted when the cafe door opened again and a white police officer entered. The atmosphere, previously relaxed, instantly became tense. The officer looked around, his gaze lingering a bit longer on the corner where Benjamin and Marcus were sitting. "Mr. Wilson," the policeman approached, lightly touching his hat. "Officer Murphy." Benjamin kept his countenance calm, though his muscles unconsciously tensed. "Officer Murphy, what can I do for you today?" "Just a routine visit. We had some incidents on the block last week. Robberies. Just checking with local merchants." Benjamin knew exactly what was happening. It was a show of power, a subtle reminder that even a successful black man like him was still subject to the authority of white officers. "We haven't noticed anything unusual, officer. Both the cafe and my toy store have been peaceful." Murphy nodded, his eyes examining Benjamin's elegant suit, gold watch, Italian leather shoes. A slight frown betrayed his irritation at seeing a black man dressed better than most white men he knew. "Keep your eyes open, Mr. Wilson, and make sure your cafe closes at the regulatory time. We've been receiving complaints about noise." It was an outright lie. The Lenox Cafe closed promptly at 9 in the evening and was known for its quiet atmosphere. But Benjamin just nodded. "Of course, officer, we always comply with all regulations." When Murphy left, Marcus released the breath he'd been holding. Even after all these years, they still make us feel like we're on borrowed territory. Benjamin checked his watch. I need to get back to the store. Thomas will come after school, and I want to be there. The two men said goodbye, and Benjamin crossed the street back to Wilson's Toys and Wonders. The store was now full, mainly black mothers with their children, though there were also some white nannies buying gifts for their employers' children. Sarah was attending to an elegantly dressed lady who was examining a porcelain doll. Patterson was supervising a young salesman who was demonstrating a small mechanical train to a fascinated boy and his mother. Benjamin observed the scene with discreet pride. This was his domain, a space he had created from nothing. Here, for a few moments, black children could feel the simple joy of choosing a toy without being shooed away or followed with suspicious glances, as happened in the large department stores downtown. As the afternoon progressed, the clientele changed. Black mothers gave way to businessmen, some black but mainly white, who entered furtively to buy presents for their children, attracted by the store's reputation for having the finest and most exclusive toys in the city. Benjamin personally attended to these customers, his professional tone and encyclopedic knowledge about each item impressing even the most reluctant. Many entered with visible discomfort, avoiding eye contact, but left with gift-wrapped boxes and a new respect for the black owner who so intimately knew the world of luxury toys. At 3:15, the doorbell rang, and Benjamin automatically looked up, expecting to see Thomas. Instead, it was an elegantly dressed white woman with her son, a boy of about 10, blonde with rosy cheeks and clothes that betrayed wealth. "Good afternoon, ma'am." Patterson immediately approached, intercepting the white customers as was the usual procedure. "How may I help you today?" The woman slightly raised her chin. "I heard this store has the hated German soldiers. Is that true?" "Yes, ma'am," Patterson confirmed with a professional smile. "We have the complete collection of the Prussian army, newly arrived from Germany. Would you like to see it?" As Patterson led the woman and her son to the display case where the soldiers were exhibited, the door opened again. This time it was Thomas, his face lit up by the expectation of seeing his father and the new toys he had mentioned that morning. Benjamin was at the back of the store, checking a newly arrived order with a supplier, momentarily out of sight. Patterson, busy with the wealthy customer, did not notice the black boy enter. Thomas walked directly to the section where the soldiers were unconsciously approaching the same display case where the white woman and her son were. He stopped a few steps away, his eyes shining at the sight of the perfect rows of miniature soldiers, each hand-painted with impressive details. "Mom, look at that one." The white boy pointed to a soldier mounted on a black horse, a small sword raised in command position. "That's the cavalry commander, sir," Thomas instinctively said, his knowledge about the soldiers escaping in his childish enthusiasm. "My father told me each one is hand-painted by craftsmen in Germany." The woman turned abruptly as if she had been approached by a wild animal rather than a well-mannered child. Her gaze ran over Thomas from head to toe, noting his clean school uniform, but clearly identifiable as being from the school for black children. "Who let you in here?" she asked, her voice icy. Thomas blinked, confused. My father." "Boy," Patterson's voice cut the air when he finally noticed Thomas. The manager quickly approached, his face a mask of professional irritation. "This is not a store for you. Leave before I call the police." "Are you enjoying this story? Then help the channel by subscribing." Look, 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed. If you're part of that group, take the chance and subscribe now. It's free, and that way you'll keep receiving incredible and exciting stories. Oh, and don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find even more exciting stories like this one. Thomas's eyes widened, a mixture of confusion and hurt crossing his young face. "But my father..." "Your father should teach you not to enter stores where you are not welcome." The woman intervened, pulling her own son closer, as if Thomas could somehow contaminate him. There are boundaries that must be respected. The white boy looked at Thomas with curiosity mixed with the prejudice already instilled in him, his blue eyes examining the black boy as if he were an exotic species in a human zoo. Patterson placed a firm hand on Thomas's shoulder, beginning to guide him toward the door. "Come on, boy. This store is not for your kind." The whole scene lasted less than a minute, but to Thomas it seemed an eternity. His small body stiffened under Patterson's touch, his eyes filled with tears that he bravely refused to shed. It was at that moment that Benjamin emerged from the back room, catching the end of the interaction. His entire body froze for a second, absorbing what he was witnessing, his son, his own son, being expelled from the store that he himself had built. "Mr. Patterson," Benjamin's voice cut the air like a steel blade, calm, but loaded with an authority that made everyone in the store turn. "Release my son immediately." Patterson turned, his hand still on Thomas's shoulder, his expression transforming from irritation to confusion and then horror as he comprehended the situation. Your son?" he stuttered, releasing Thomas as if his contact suddenly burned him. Benjamin crossed the store in measured steps, each movement deliberate. He placed a protective hand on Thomas's shoulder, facing Patterson with a look that made the man involuntarily back away. "Yes, Mr. Patterson. This is Thomas Wilson, my son and heir." Patterson paled, his gaze nervously jumping between Benjamin, Thomas, and the white customer, who was now observing the scene with an expression of barely disguised shock. "Mr. Wilson, I didn't know." "Evidently not," Benjamin interrupted him, his voice still controlled but icy. "Despite me mentioning this morning that my son would come after school." He turned to the woman, who now seemed slightly uncomfortable, although her chin was still raised in silent defiance. "Ma'am, I apologize if my son disturbed you in any way. Thomas has exceptional knowledge about our collection of soldiers, since he spends a lot of time here, in this store. That belongs to his father." The woman opened her mouth and closed it again, momentarily speechless. Her son pulled her sleeve. "Mom, is this man the owner of the store?" "Quiet, Charles," she automatically muttered, regaining her composure. "Mr. Wilson, I presume. There has been a misunderstanding. Your employee was just following what I imagine to be the store's policies." Benjamin kept his gaze steady. "My store does not have a policy of refusing service to anyone based on the color of their skin, ma'am. I firmly believe that all customers deserve the same respect and attention." He turned to Patterson, who seemed to want to disappear into the floor of the store. "Mr. Patterson, I believe we have a pending private conversation. Please wait for me in my office." Patterson nodded miserably and climbed the stairs, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. Benjamin turned his attention to Thomas, kneeling down to be at the boy's eye level. "Are you all right, son?" Thomas nodded, his eyes still teary, but his chin raised in imitation of his father's dignified posture. "I'm fine, Dad." Benjamin smiled gently, running his hand through his son's curly hair. "Why don't you go upstairs and ask Sarah to show you the new soldiers that arrived this morning? I'm sure she'll be happy to prepare a special set for you." Thomas hesitated. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You didn't cause any trouble, Thomas. This is our store. You belong here as much as I do." Benjamin straightened up, looking at the woman who was still observing the interaction. "Ma'am, if you're still interested in the Haida soldiers, I'll be happy to assist you personally. Or if you prefer, Sarah, my most experienced saleswoman, would be delighted to help you." The woman hesitated, clearly conflicted. Her son tugged at her arm again. "Mom, I want to see the soldiers the boy was talking about." "The cavalry commander." For a moment it seemed she would refuse, gather her son and leave. But Charles's eager expression and perhaps a touch of shame made her reconsider. "Very well," she said stiffly. "We'll stay." Benjamin nodded. "Excellent. Sarah, could you please show the young gentleman our Heidi collection? And Thomas, why don't you help? You know more about those soldiers than anyone in this store." Sarah appeared promptly, her face composed despite having witnessed the entire scene. "Of course, Mr. Wilson. Come along, young gentleman." Thomas looked up at his father, uncertain. "Go ahead, son," Benjamin encouraged him. "Remember what I told you about our responsibility?" Thomas nodded, understanding passing between father and son. Then, with dignity far beyond his 8 years, he stepped forward. "This way, sir," he said to the white boy, his voice steady. "The cavalry section is over here. There are 24 different pieces, each with unique details." The white boy followed, curiosity overcoming the learned prejudice, at least for the moment. The woman trailed behind, her expression still guarded, but with a hint of something else, perhaps surprise, perhaps grudging respect. Benjamin watched them go, then turned to the staircase leading to his office. It was time to have a conversation with Mr. Patterson about the values and principles of Wilson's Toys and Wonders. As Benjamin climbed the stairs, he reflected on the irony of the situation. Even in his own store, built with his own hands, financed with his own money, his son could not escape the long shadow of prejudice. It was a painful reminder of the reality they lived in, a reality where a black man's achievements, no matter how significant, could be nullified in an instant by the color of his skin. Patterson was waiting in the office, standing awkwardly by the window, his normally confident posture now deflated. "Mr. Patterson," Benjamin began, closing the door behind him, "I'd like to understand what happened downstairs." The manager turned, his face pale. "Mr. Wilson, I cannot express how deeply I regret the incident. I had no idea." "That the black child was my son?" Benjamin finished the sentence. "And if he hadn't been my son, what then, Mr. Patterson? Would your behavior have been justified?" Patterson swallowed. I was following what I understood to be the standard practice in most establishments, to discourage colored patrons who might make other customers uncomfortable." Benjamin sat down behind his desk, his face impassive despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Let me be clear, Mr. Patterson. Wilson's Toys and Wonders does not discriminate against any customer based on the color of their skin. I opened this store precisely because I knew what it felt like to be that child, to press my nose against a shop window, dreaming of toys I would never be allowed to touch. Not because my father couldn't afford them, but because stores like that weren't for my kind." He leaned forward slightly. "Every child who enters this store will be treated with respect and dignity. Every parent who comes to buy a gift for their child will receive the same level of service, regardless of their appearance. Is that understood?" Patterson nodded, his eyes downcast. "Yes, sir, completely." "Good." Benjamin rose. "Now you have a choice to make. You can continue to work here following these principles, or you can tender your resignation. I won't hold it against you if you choose the latter. Not every white man is comfortable working for a black employer, particularly one who insists on treating all people equally." Patterson hesitated, clearly struggling with internal conflict. Finally, he straightened his shoulders. "I would like to stay, Mr. Wilson, and I'd like to apologize personally to your son." Benjamin studied the man's face, searching for sincerity. "Very well, but understand this. I'm giving you a second chance because I believe people can grow beyond their prejudices. Disappoint me again, and there won't be a third." As they descended the stairs back to the main floor, Benjamin could see Thomas animatedly explaining something to the white boy, who was listening with rapt attention. Sarah stood nearby, a smile of pride on her face as she watched Thomas knowledgeably discuss the miniature soldiers. "This one," Thomas was saying, "is a Prussian drummer. See how detailed his uniform is? And this one is a standard bearer. The flag is actually made of real fabric." "Wow," the white boy, Charles, breathed. "How do you know so much about them?" Thomas smiled shyly. "My father taught me. He knows everything about toys." The woman was watching the interaction with an unreadable expression, her earlier hauteur somewhat subdued. When she noticed Benjamin and Patterson approaching, she straightened. "Mr. Wilson, she began, her voice more measured than before. "Your son has been most educational. He has quite a knowledge of these soldiers." "Thank you, ma'am," Benjamin replied politely. "Thomas has a passion for history and fine craftsmanship. A passion I've encouraged since he was very young." An awkward silence fell. Then Patterson stepped forward. "Thomas," he said, kneeling down to the boy's level, "I owe you an apology. My behavior was inexcusable. I hope you can forgive me." Thomas looked to his father, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "It's all right, Mr. Patterson," the boy said with a dignity and grace that made Benjamin's chest swell with pride. "Everyone makes mistakes." The woman watched this exchange, her face a complex mask of emotions. Her son tugged at her sleeve again. "Mom, can I get the cavalry commander?" "The one Thomas showed me." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "Yes, Charles." "And perhaps," she turned to Benjamin, "Mr. Wilson, would it be possible for my son to return sometime? Thomas has offered to explain more about the historical context of these pieces." Benjamin's eyebrows rose slightly in surprise. "Of course, ma'am. Thomas would be delighted to share his knowledge. Wilson's Toys and Wonders welcomes all children who wish to learn and explore." As the woman completed her purchase, the most expensive cavalry commander and 2 accompanying soldiers, Benjamin observed the subtle shift in her demeanor. She was not transformed, not suddenly free of the prejudices ingrained over a lifetime, but a small crack had appeared in the wall. A crack through which, perhaps, a little light might eventually shine. After the customers left, Benjamin placed an arm around Thomas's shoulders. "I'm proud of you, son. You handled yourself with grace and dignity." Thomas leaned against his father. "I was scared when Mr. Patterson told me to leave. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong." "You did nothing wrong, Thomas. Never believe otherwise." Benjamin squeezed his son's shoulder. "In this world, there will always be people who judge you before knowing you. Your job isn't to make them comfortable with their prejudice. It's to stand tall in the knowledge of your own worth." As they walked through the store together, checking displays and greeting customers, Benjamin felt the familiar mixture of fierce pride and protective fear that defined fatherhood for men like him. He could build empires, amass fortunes, create spaces of beauty and wonder, but he could not fully shield his son from the harsh realities of the world they inhabited. All he could do was prepare Thomas, teach him to navigate the treacherous waters of a society that would often see only his skin color, not his brilliance, his kindness, or his worth as a human being. And hope, always hope, that by the time Thomas was grown, the world might be a fraction less cruel, a fraction more just, than the one Benjamin had been born into. As the day waned and the store prepared to close, Benjamin stood at the window, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Behind him, Thomas was carefully arranging a new display of toy airplanes, his small hands moving with precision and care. "Dad," Thomas called, "do you think one day I'll run the store?" Benjamin turned, his heart full. "Of course you will, son. One day all of this will be yours. And perhaps by then, no one will question your right to be here." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I hope so. And I hope other kids like me can have nice toys too." "That's why we're here, son," Benjamin said softly. "That's exactly why we're here." As they locked up the store and stepped out into the Harlem night, Benjamin Wilson held his son's hand tightly. The world might not yet be ready to accept them as equals, but in their defiance, in their very existence, lay the seeds of change. A toy store might seem an unlikely battleground in the long struggle for dignity and respect, but Benjamin knew that revolutions began in unexpected places, even in the heart of a black boy who dared to dream of a world where he could enter any door without fear of being turned away. The car was waiting at the curb, Samuel standing at attention beside it. As they approached, Benjamin spotted Officer Murphy watching from across the street, his gaze following the well-dressed black man and his son with undisguised resentment. Benjamin nodded politely in the officer's direction, then helped Thomas into the car. "Home, Samuel," he said. "It's been a long day." As the automobile pulled away from the curb, Benjamin didn't look back at the store or the watching policeman. His eyes were fixed forward on the road ahead, just as his mind was fixed on the future. A future he was building brick by brick for Thomas and for all the children who would come after. The struggle would not end with him. It might not even end with Thomas. But as long as there were fathers willing to stand their ground, children brave enough to face down prejudice with dignity, and cracks appearing in the walls of hatred and fear, there was hope. And hope, Benjamin Wilson knew, was a force more powerful than all the prejudice in the world. Are you enjoying this story? Then help the channel by subscribing. Look, 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed. If you're part of that group, take the chance and subscribe now. It's free, and that way you'll keep receiving incredible and exciting stories. Oh, and don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find even more exciting stories like this one. The car turned a corner, leaving Lenox Avenue behind. Benjamin pulled Thomas close. The warmth of his son, a reminder of what was at stake and what was possible in the world they were fighting to create.